AITA for unintentionally getting a midwife fired? I'm active duty military. My wife and I began trying for a baby about 2 years after we got married, and after a few months she got pregnant with our first child. About 6 weeks after she found out, I was deployed for a 6-month stint. Sadly, that meant I would miss all of her OB appointments except the very first one to confirm she was pregnant. Early in her pregnancy, she decided using a midwife would give her a better birth experience, and I was totally on board because she's the one giving birth and I wanted her to feel 100% confident in the people assisting. It had also been decided that the people in the room, aside from medical staff, would be me for obvious reasons and one of our mothers. My mom lives about an hour by car from the base I'm stationed at, while her mom lives a 4-hour plane ride away. Ideally, her mom would be able to get there in time, but she loves my mom too and was okay with her being there if labor went fast and her mom couldn't make it in time. Fast forward to me getting back from the deployment and her being really close to giving birth. Like due in a week close. She was supposed to have an OB appointment that I would be able to go to, but ended up going into labor very early on the morning of the appointment. We go to the civilian hospital and they confirm she's in active labor. I called her mom, who immediately booked a flight that would have gotten her here at about noon. Then my mom, who came to the hospital a few hours later. A while later, the midwife comes in to see my wife and was rude from the start. My wife told her I was back from deployment and she calmed down a little, but was still clearly not happy I was in the room. Especially once I started cracking jokes to try to distract my wife from the pain of the contractions. Then the midwife glared at me and told me to take this seriously and have respect for my wife while she's in pain. I thought her hostility was weird, but was more focused on my wife and doing all I could to support her. As it got closer to noon, my wife was almost 9 centimeters dilated, and so I decided not to go pick up her mom from the airport and had her take a cab instead, so I wouldn't have to leave for over an hour to drive to the airport. When her mom did get to the hospital, I left the L&D floor briefly to go downstairs and pay the cab driver so her mom wouldn't need to. As the cab is pulling up, I got a call from my mom telling me the OB and midwife were there and the baby was coming fast. Of course, I rushed back up there after tossing some cash to the cab driver, so her mom and I could be there for the birth. When I got back to the L&D floor, my mom was in the waiting room since she had to step out to make the phone call and also knew she would be waiting outside. I used the intercom to ask to be let back in, and to my surprise, I was denied entry. They said they had an order to not let me or anyone in to see my wife. That was really confusing, so I asked why, and was just told I wouldn't be let in and not to tie them up on the intercom or security would be called. So the 3 of us waited outside, since my wife didn't answer her phone as she was actively pushing our baby out. Well over 2 hours later, she was able to call me back and asked where I had been. I told her the hospital staff wouldn't let me in, but I had been in the waiting room trying to get answers for almost 2.5 hours. Long story short, it was the midwife who told the desk staff that I wasn't to be let back in. She lied and said my wife had reported I was abusive and she didn't want me there. So not only did my poor wife have to give birth alone, and without me or her mom there for support, I missed the birth of my daughter. It meant a lot to me to be there to see my baby come into the world because I missed so much of the pregnancy, and that was ripped away from me because this awful woman didn't like that I never showed up to a single appointment the entire pregnancy, despite being told by my wife that I was deployed. So, with my wife's support, I filed a formal complaint about the midwife, and she ended up getting fired by the OB's office. My wife is naturally on my side, but some of our friends have said I was wrong to make such a big deal out of it and taking away the woman's livelihood. Was I the age for reporting her, which caused her to lose her job?